And there it is, we are drop shotting. This is one of the most natural presentations there is. And people really tend to complicate this technique when the reality is, with this style of fishing, less can be more, and confidence is key. Good morning and welcome everyone. Today we're gonna be going over the general basics of drop shotting to give you the confidence and the right peace of mind knowing that you've rigged it up correctly, you're getting the right action out of it, and lastly, that you're around fish. We're gonna complete the circle of a drop shotter so you now know how to set it up, but you have the right mind frame. And just like Harry Potter and that crazy little stick he has as a wand, the drop shot starts with the right worm. So we'll be using big bite baits, shaking squirrel, which we're gonna break down further in rigging. All right, so first with the shaking squirrel, it actually is made of a very soft plastic, which gives it a very natural look. Then this flat belly it has catches a lot of water and gives it additional action. Next, these baits were designed by Jeff Crete for clear water situations. So it comes in an assortment of great clear water colors. Next is the setup of this bait. We start with a hook, then on the tag end of that knot, we are gonna attach our drop shot weight. Now with the hook, I start with a size 1 drop shot hook with a Palomar knot. Now when I attach a worm, I either nose hook it or I wacky rig it. The nose hook setup is gonna sink a lot faster and it's gonna be a lot more mainlined presentation that I can work a little bit more efficiently down some cover and things like that. Whereas the wacky rig is a slower presentation. It's gonna fall a lot slower, making it look more natural, like something dying, but then also when it's on the bottom, when I'm lifting or I'm subtly kind of shaking it, both ends are really gonna have a lot more action than just that one tail at the end where it's nose hooked. Next is your tag end. This is how far you're gonna put the drop shot weight down from the hook. Now there's different reasons for having different lengths. I usually start with about a 6 to 10 inch tag end. Now, if you want to go longer, there's a couple reasons to do so. The first reason is if you're fishing around some grass or a muddy bottom where that grass or that soot comes up a foot or two, you can actually put that drop shot weight a foot or two down, and so that little worm will actually sit higher up above that cloud, any kind of grass or whatever noise down there, and those fish will be able to see it. The second reason is that fall of the bait. If you just have a small tag end, that bait's gonna fall down quickly. But if you have it up 2 feet, when you give it slack, that bait's gonna slowly and naturally fall down. When you lift it back up, it'll come back up 2 feet and then it'll fall back down. So a few different reasons that you can change that tag end as long as you know what that's changing down underneath the water. Now the size of the weight is obviously gonna impact how fast the bait gets down to the bottom. I usually use anywhere from a 1/8 to a 1/4 ounce weight, and I'll vary depending on what I'm trying to do or what I'm trying to accomplish with that. Also, when you're using a heavier weight, it's easier to keep that bait in one place. If you have a 1/4 ounce weight and you cast it up on a little spot, you can really slowly work that bait and it's not gonna move much. But if you have a very light weight, any kind of pressure you put on the line is gonna move that bait out of the strike zone. Next is fishing line. I spool up with 6 to 8 pound mono or fluorocarbon. Remember, this is finesse technique, so you really want that light line. Lastly is the rod. You want a nice finesse rod. I'm using the finesse stick right here. And the idea is you want a soft tip so you're not overworking the bait. If you have too stiff of a rod, when you lift up and you put any pressure on that line, it's actually gonna be pulling that bait away from the targeted area you're trying to fish. But if you have a nice soft tip, you're gonna be able to apply a little pressure to that bait and without having to move it too much, and you'll be able to feel those subtle little bites. Also, having a rod that has a lot of give to it is going to help fight these fish a lot better. These tiny little hooks, they have a high percentage hookup rate, but they only skin hook the fish. So if you have a real stout rod and that fish yanks hard, a lot of times they can tear that little layer of skin and get away from you. So the right finesse rod, very important. Retrieval. Now, no matter how you're retrieving this back, whether you just make slow little lifts with the rod tip, or you have that rod tip down and you want to just drag it, it's important to know what happens every time you tighten up that line. Oh man, I got a fish. Oh, it came off. I was not ready for that. Okay, so when you tighten up that line, what you're doing is you're lifting that bait up off the bottom. And if you give it slack again, that bait is fluttering back down. This is something, if you don't put too much tension in your line, you can repeat this multiple times without moving that bait much at all. But if you put a little tension in that line, that bait's gonna drag, a couple feet, and then you can repeat the process. You can let it fall, lift it back up a little bit, let it fall again. But as long as you know what that bait is doing down there without much effort from you, you can really maximize the benefits that this technique has. Okay, now first, when you make your cast towards your target, you want to watch that bait fall. If you find that you're getting hit on the way down, or as you reel in that slack, you realize there's a fish on there and that happens a couple times, you may want to think about using a smaller weight. What this is going to do is that's going to slow down that fall. That bait's going to take longer to sink because those fish seem to be feeding on it on the fall. So if you give it longer to fall, that may increase more bites that you get throughout the day. Now, switching to the opposite side of that, if you're finding that you really have to work this bait slowly along the bottom to get any bites, you can increase the size of your weight, go up to a 1/4 ounce weight, and you'll keep that bait in contact with the bottom. You'll be able to keep that bait in one spot a lot easier, so you can spend more time enticing those finicky bass to actually bite. Location. Now, when you're fishing the drop shot, you want to make sure you're in areas where there are fish nearby. This is such a slow retrieve. You really want to be methodical with it. You want to make sure you're in an area where you can actually have some success. Now, when the bite gets tough, if you're struggling finding any fish, you can usually rely on main lake points. If you take a look at a map and you just circle some of the biggest points that stick way out in the lake, you can pretty much bet that there's going to be fish somewhere on that point year round. After I eliminate points, or after I go fish those, then I'll move back into creek channels, focusing on any kind of little secondary points that are back in those channels, or any kind of man-made structure like a launch ramp, some kind of road bed. You can work the side, you can work on top of it, and then of course island tops as well. But those are all very productive areas to really be able to slow down those fish. They'll hunker down around structure. When they aren't feeding, fish will go just relate to that cover, hang out until they go up and feed again, but you can still catch them when they're not actively feeding when you work this drop shot. Now, generally, when I pull up to a piece of structure I'm gonna fish, let's say it's a point, I'm gonna cast the main spot. I'm gonna cast right up on that point, about 5 to 10 feet of water, and then I'll slowly drag it or work it away from that. If I don't get bit, I'll make a cast 10, 20 feet over one of the sides of the point, usually the steeper side I like. If I don't get anything there, I'll make one shallow, and if I don't get one on either of those casts, then I'll move on to another piece of structure. When you're fishing clear water, fish will move a long ways away. So if you cast up on a point, if there's fish anywhere in that vicinity, they will see it. It's clear water, they'll see it drop, and you're slowly working, that bait's there for a long time, that gives them time to come over, take a look at it, and finally bite it. So if you make a couple casts, don't get bit, go to your next piece of structure and pick that apart. Oh yeah, oh yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, there we go. Man, this technique can be so effortless once you figure it out, once you have the confidence in realizing that if you have the right bait, like this Big Bites shaking squirrel, you know that bait's working down there. It's looking natural. You've just got to put it in front of the fish for the right amount of time, and eventually good things are gonna happen. But it's important when you're fishing down there to be thinking about what that bait's doing. When you're lifting, know that bait's coming up, and then when you give it slack, that bait is naturally falling back down. But anyway, when you figure it out, the fishing can be outstanding with a drop shot, a technique that everyone should have in their arsenal. As we've talked about all these reaction baits, these different techniques to locate fish, cover a lot of water, well, when you find productive areas, you can go back in with a drop shot and you can catch those fish that didn't want to bite, didn't want to go for that easy meal, that weren't suckers for that drop shot or that reaction bait. You come back through, you can catch them with a drop shot and catch a lot more fish. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this drop shot special. I hope this makes you a complete drop shot enuer. And anyway, if you liked the video, hit the thumbs up, leave a comment below, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'll catch you out on the water.